Thank you, Minister, and thank you for the amendment. You said here at committee stage last week that the purpose of this amendment was to facilitate investment in Bordnamona projects, and I understand that that's the basis for this amendment. And on that basis, I will be supporting the amendment that you have tabled. I want to specifically address the purpose of this amendment for a minute, Minister. And that is, the purpose of this amendment is to facilitate the employment of Bordnamona staff to carry out rehabilitation work on the cutaway bogs across the Midland counties. And I commend that particular provision in it. That's a specific provision I asked for this time last year to be included in the Climate Action Fund. And I want to thank your predecessor, Minister Bruton, yourself and the officials in the department for taking that specific proposal on board, and I welcome that, because, as you know, the decision not to have a harvest this year is having a huge detrimental impact on many of the seasonal staff and permanent staff in Bordnamona, particularly across East Galway, Roscommon, Longford, Westmeath, Laois and Offaly, many of whom are very dependent on that seasonal work, and many businesses across the Midlands that are dependent on that. I would like, Minister, if you could respond to me and provide some clarity to the employees in Bordnamona now who are in limbo for the last number of months, some of them drawing the pandemic unemployment payment, some of them drawing the wage subsidy scheme through Bordnamona, some of them seasonal staff who were not called back this year and don't know whether they will get any work and are getting no financial support whatsoever, even though their jobs are in limbo. And what's frustrating from the employees in Bordnamona that I'm hearing is they've been given no information from government, they have been given no information from Bordnamona as to what is happening in the short to medium term in terms of employment. So I'd hope, Minister, when you respond, you might provide some clarity in relation to that. And also, Minister, if you could look into a specific issue for me, and that's the perverse situation where we, the taxpayer, are borrowing money to fund the pandemic unemployment payment, to fund the wage subsidy scheme within Bordnamona for staff that have applied for the voluntary early retirement scheme. They're looking for redundancy, and the Bordnamona will not let them out and retire, and yet they are receiving a subsidy from the state where there is no employment for them at present. Now, surely it makes sense for those staff who want to retire to let them out the door and try and secure as much employment as possible for the staff that are left within the company. I think it's a public scandal that this is happening, and I would ask you and plead with you to intervene. Two final points I want to raise with you, Minister. The first is the specific provision in this amendment, and as you have said, the purpose of this is to look at projects where there may not be an economic dividend, or it may not win purely based on the climate impact. Now, as you know, Minister, the purpose for that is to put funding into Bordnamona to provide employment for its staff. I'm led to believe that the plans that are currently being drafted by Bordnamona to access this Climate Action Fund are very heavy on capital and not so heavy in terms of employment. And I can tell you, Minister, that for me is completely unacceptable. It was never the purpose of me looking for this provision to be put in the legislation. It was never the purpose of the Climate Action Fund to purely look at capital investment. But I am told that the plans that are being drawn up are over-engineered and under labour intensive, when you and I know very well it must be the other way around. So while you're not going to look for the same provisions in terms of the criteria regarding the funding you would give to Bordnamona, I would urge you, Minister, to ensure that you get independent advice to ensure that whatever work is carried out is as labour intensive as possible and ensures as much employment for the seasonal staff staff as is possible. And I believe that the focus needs to be on rehabilitation of the bogs in the first instance, and secondly, providing public access through those bogs. Last Sunday I had the opportunity to cycle from Ballinasloe to Shannon Bridge through the bog just south of the town of Ballinasloe, along the existing railway works line that's there. But it would be great if we had a proper walkway and cycleway through that bog from Ballinasloe right through to Shannon Bridge. The same in many of the other bogs across the Midlands, and as you know, there are very detailed proposals coming forward about opening up the Mount Dillon Bog complex in Roscommon and Longford for public access. We should be getting Bord na Móna staff to do that work, and it is imperative that the funding that is made available through the Climate Action Fund is for labour-intensive work for that specific purpose, and I hope that you will ensure that that happens. Final point I want to make to you, Minister, is we need to take the milled peat off these bogs, and we need to take it off it urgently. Quite recently, in the last fortnight, I was on the road between Ballydangan and Clonfad, going past the bogs at Clonburn, and there was a grey cloud or a brown cloud in the sky of milled peat that is there on those bogs at the moment, causing environmental problems across communities in that area. That peat cannot be left in those bogs. It must be removed from those bogs. Now, I don't want to see a situation that happened in Littleton, where that milled peat was bulldozed into the drains in Littleton. If that were to happen across the Midland bogs, that will cause an environmental catastrophe, because that milled peat will run from those drains into the River Suck, into the River Shannon, compound an already difficult environmental situation in those rivers, as well as compounding the flooding problems that we have within the catchment of both of those rivers. So I want an assurance from you, Minister, that some mechanism will be found to ensure that that peat is taken off those bogs, is burned in Lanesborough and Shannon Bridge for power generation before the end of this year, before the ground conditions deteriorate, that peat cannot be removed off those bogs and taken off it once and for all. Thank you.
I give a little bit of leeway there. The subject matter is the amendment that's before you. So if the next speakers, please.
Very much indeed, and I'd like to thank each of the deputies for their contribution. I'll try, if I can, Chair, to answer some of the questions raised. And firstly to Denis Naughten, absolutely the purpose of this amendment is to allow the sort of projects that Bord na Móna are now looking at in terms of bog rehabilitation, rewetting bogs, storing carbon within the bogs, and it's specifically for that sort of project that we are, and it is following on my predecessor and yourself, further predecessors, supportive of being that approach. I'm glad to make sure we deliver it here. With regard to level of employment, I've seen some figures where I was actually encouraged that there is employment in this. We don't have the specifics yet. It'll have to wait for the fund applications to come in. But I think there is a real employment opportunity for Bord na Móna, because the skills involved in this area are the exact skills that the workers of this company have in logistics, in managing bogs, in having energy and expertise in managing the natural landscape. And it will vary. The issue, as I understand, in terms of managing the bogs in this way, is every bog is different. Every bog requires site-specific knowledge and different engineering solutions and mechanisms to deliver the right solution. With regard to what the Deputy says regarding workers looking for redundancy, it does seem to me that, or certainly what I will do is I'll ask the officials to come back if they could and directly reply to the member to outline why might that be the case, that, as you say, that workers would be availing of the wage subsidy scheme and at the same time be looking for voluntary redundancy where the state could be able to pay them in that way. That is absolutely something that we would commit to do. With regard to the stores or stocks of milled peat on that bog between Ballydown and Clonburn, I think you were saying it was, near there.
Ballydangan
and
Clonfad, but it's all over
it's right across the Midlands. We have milled peat on the bogs, Minister.
Absolutely, and I think the site you gave, the example you gave in Littleton, and this is, I mean, the issue about what's happening in terms of the harvest not proceeding this year, it relates purely to environmental issues, environmental impact assessment, and absolutely I think it requires the company, as they move from brown to green, to make sure that they don't leave an environmental hazard where the peat would run off into the water, and I would absolutely pursue that directly with the company to make sure that it does, that is what takes place. And can I say, I believe there is actually real employment opportunities for this company across a whole variety of different areas, not just in the rehabilitation of bogs, but in new energy projects. I believe their strategic plan last year is the right direction. I believe they should be going further and actually looking at additional other ventures. I think it was too narrow in some of the projects that they were looking for, but it's absolutely what we should strive to achieve. Deputy